There are moments when your heart feels out of sync with life itself, as if everything around you moves in rhythm, but your soul is dancing to a song you can't hear. And maybe you've blamed yourself for that. Maybe you've convinced yourself it was your failure, your lack of discipline, your mistake. But what if the real problem wasn't your choice, it was your timing? We often forget that even the right step taken too soon can lead to the wrong outcome. And sometimes, what feels like delay is actually God protecting you from arriving at the promise before your character is ready to carry it. You see, the greatest heartbreaks don't always come from bad decisions. They come from running ahead of God. We pray, we believe, we declare, but when the answer doesn't arrive, anxiety hijacks our faith. We confuse silence with absence. We misinterpret stillness as rejection. But Ecclesiastes 3 didn't come to frustrate us. It came to free us. There is a time for everything, it says. That means the promise still exists. It's just not now. And maybe the greatest miracle is not in receiving it, but in becoming who you need to be while you wait. Faith isn't just about trusting what God said. It's about trusting when He chooses to say now, or when He chooses not to. Some seasons are designed not for movement, but for molding. And what you call wasted time, heaven may call preparation. What looks like silence might be strategy. What feels like abandonment could be alignment, because timing to God isn't just chronological, it's transformational. It's not about the hour on the clock, but the posture of your soul. So, if you've been feeling stuck, forgotten, delayed, this isn't condemnation, it's invitation. An invitation to surrender your internal stopwatch and tune into eternity's rhythm. To understand that being out of sync with the world might mean you're finally aligning with heaven. Stay with me through this message, because what's coming next might be the release your heart has been praying for. Not just in circumstance, but in revelation. Sometimes the delay isn't the enemy. It's the evidence that God is still writing something greater than your expectations. When Solomon declared, "There is a time for everything," he wasn't drafting poetry, he was unveiling a divine system. Every phrase in Ecclesiastes 3 is a heartbeat of heaven, pulsing with intention, balance, and eternal wisdom. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot. These aren't random opposites. They're sacred appointments. God is telling us that nothing happens by chance. Every joy and every sorrow, every gain and every loss are wrapped inside the clockwork of His purpose. Even the moments you don't understand are part of a rhythm written long before your first breath. This structure, rooted in Hebrew parallelism, is more than literary elegance. It's a holy compass. When the word uses contrasts, it isn't trying to confuse us. It's revealing that God is sovereign over every extreme and every transition in between. He is the God of the seed and the harvest, of beginnings and endings, of laughter and mourning. And most importantly, He is present in all of it. There is no season so joyful that you don't need Him, and no season so dark that He's not right there with you. That's the message encoded in this sacred rhythm. You are never out of reach. Ecclesiastes 3 doesn't just mention events, it touches the soul. A time to weep, a time to laugh, a time to mourn, a time to dance. These are not distant concepts. They're the very things you're living through. It's God acknowledging your emotions, not ignoring them. And when God names something in His word, He brings it under His authority. That means your tears are seen, your waiting is counted, and your joy has a foundation that cannot be shaken. There is immense peace in knowing that heaven has already planned what your heart still doesn't know how to process. Time, in this context, is not your enemy, it's your ally. While you're obsessing over the ticking clock, God is using every second to do what your eyes can't see. Every silent prayer, every hidden sacrifice, every night you cried yourself to sleep, none of it is wasted. Sometimes, the very moment that feels like nothing is happening is the one where the most is being built inside you. The delay isn't a denial, it's a deepening. Time is not taking something from you. It's making space in you for what's coming next. And what's coming is always greater than what you thought you lost. So don't despise the waiting. Don't resent the in-between. In God's rhythm, even the pauses have purpose. Your current season is not an accident. It's a note in a symphony designed by the conductor of time. Maybe your life doesn't look like progress, but that's only because you're judging it by earthly standards. Heaven measures differently. God doesn't move according to urgency, but according to purpose. And right now, purpose is growing. Even if progress isn't visible, trust the rhythm, because when you're in sync with heaven, you don't just survive the wait, you are transformed by it. When you truly understand that God is the Lord of time, your entire perspective begins to shift. Delays no longer feel like divine indifference, but intentional pauses filled with purpose. You stop interpreting waiting as punishment and start seeing it as process. Ecclesiastes 3 isn't merely stating that things happen, it's declaring that everything happens under the governance of heaven. The seasons of your life, no matter how chaotic or confusing, are not slipping through God's fingers. They are being orchestrated with precision, even if you can't yet perceive the melody. There's something powerful about releasing your need to control the clock. We're trained to chase deadlines, to measure success by speed, to feel defeated when nothing seems to move. But God's clock is different. It doesn't tick, it unfolds. He works through layers, not seconds, through revelation, not rush. And that's why surrendering to His timing isn't passive. It's the most radical form of trust. Because in doing so, you're declaring, I believe that God sees what I cannot. I trust that what He's doing in secret will bloom at the perfect moment. Think of the farmer. He plants, waters, waits. He doesn't panic when the seed disappears. Underground, he knows growth is happening where eyes can't reach. The same is true for your life. You may be in a season where nothing looks like it's changing, but beneath the surface, God is cultivating roots. What looks like a burial may actually be the beginning of resurrection. He's not punishing you with delay, He's anchoring you with preparation, because premature blessings can become burdens. But what is born in the right season comes with strength to sustain it. God's sovereignty also means that no moment is wasted. Even the seasons that feel like failure can become foundations. Romans 8:28 reminds us, all things work together for the good of those who love God. Not just the victories, not just the breakthroughs, all things, including what broke you, including what didn't happen, including the silence you mistook for rejection. In God's hands, even the ashes are usable. He takes the fragments of your timeline and weaves them into something that carries eternal meaning. Nothing is lost. Nothing is random. So if you find yourself frustrated by timing, don't fight the process. Align with it. Stop comparing your pace to others. Stop demanding answers on your schedule. The God who created time is never late. And His silence is not His absence. It's His signal to pause and prepare. You are not falling behind. You're being positioned. What looks like delay is really design. What feels like distance is actually development. Let go of the clock you're clinging to and take hold of the hand that holds eternity. Pain is the one teacher no one wants to learn from, yet it's the one whose lessons shape us the most. In God's classroom, suffering is not cruelty, but curriculum. It's not designed to break you, but to build you. Scripture doesn't glorify pain, but it does redeem it. Because suffering, when placed in God's hands, becomes soil. And in that soil, the roots of faith go deeper than they ever could in seasons of ease. While we long for miracles, God often uses pain to form the miracle within us first. Not every trial is a punishment. Many are invitations to transformation. Take a moment to consider the potter in Jeremiah 18. He watches the clay collapse and starts again, not to destroy, but to rebuild with more precision. That's how God treats your broken moments. He doesn't discard them. He doesn't abandon you in your weakness. He places his hands on the parts of your life that feel misshapen, and he reshapes them into something useful. Yes, it hurts, but it's holy. That disappointment, it's not the end. It's the moment God pressed his fingers deeper to mold your purpose with greater strength and clarity. Look at Joseph. Betrayed, sold, imprisoned, all before he ever stepped into the palace. What seemed like a cruel detour was actually a divine path. Each injustice was a preparation for leadership. Each silence was God building endurance. And when Joseph stood in the place of power, he could say to his brothers, "What you meant for evil, God meant for good." That's the power of redemptive suffering. What tried to destroy you becomes part of the destiny that lifts others. Your scars can become someone else's map to healing if you allow God to write through your pain. And that's the paradox of the gospel. Out of the cross came resurrection. Out of death came life. And out of your tears, God is cultivating testimony. Every trial you've endured, every prayer whispered through pain, every moment you felt forgotten, none of it is wasted. Heaven collects tears like treasures. Earth sees suffering as failure, but heaven sees it as refinement. And what's forged in the fire becomes unshakable. You're not broken beyond repair. You're being refined beyond recognition. Don't rush the process. Let it do its holy work. So the next time pain knocks at your door, don't curse it. Ask what it came to teach. Don't rush to escape. Stay long enough to let the lesson take root. Because some breakthroughs are born only in the wilderness, and some strengths are unlocked only through sorrow. Yes, God can bless you instantly, but when he chooses the longer road, it's because he's building something in you that can't be shaken. What's formed in the dark will shine brighter in the light. And what nearly broke you, it's the very thing God will use to bring others back to life. Life doesn't follow predictable routes, and the road to God's promises rarely looks like the one we imagined. Detours, interruptions, and broken dreams often feel like failures, but they're not. In God's map, the winding roads are often the ones that lead us closest to him. When he says no, or when heaven feels silent, it's not rejection, it's redirection, a divine rerouting. And though your heart may ache for the door that didn't open, it's God's way of steering you towards something better. You weren't denied, you were protected from what would have cost you more than you knew. Romans 8:28 isn't a cliche, it's a cornerstone. All things work together for the good of those who love God. All things, not just victories, but valleys, not just answers, but silence. Even your most painful prayers, the ones that ended in tears, are being woven into something eternally meaningful. That closed door, it wasn't rejection. It was God shielding you from a chapter that looked right, but would have crushed your soul. Trust this, he won't hand you a counterfeit when his real promise is still being prepared. Heaven knows how to say not yet with perfect love. We often think silence means absence, but in Scripture, silence is often the space where God does his deepest work. Think of a seed buried in darkness. For days, maybe weeks, nothing seems to happen. But underneath the soil, transformation is taking place. Roots growing, foundations forming. That's how divine direction works. Just because you can't see change doesn't mean God isn't orchestrating it. His providence is never loud, but it is always precise. His silence is not neglect, it's construction. And one day, what felt like waiting will reveal what he was building all along. In those silent seasons, our faith is tested and strengthened. You learn to walk without answers, to trust when there's no map, to keep going even when the future feels blurry. And in doing so, you discover a faith that isn't based on results, but on relationship. The kind of faith that holds God's hand, even when it doesn't see the destination. That's not weak faith. That's mature faith. The faith of Abraham, who went without knowing. The faith of Mary, who trusted without clarity. The faith of Jesus, who surrendered even in agony. Faith that moves without guarantees. So if you're standing in a hallway of unanswered prayers, don't turn back. That delay might be your redirection. That silence might be His strategy. God's providence doesn't always show up in fireworks. Sometimes it arrives like dew, quiet, subtle, but refreshing everything it touches. Your job isn't to force doors open, it's to remain faithful while He prepares the right one. And when that door does open, you'll look back and realize every closed one was a blessing. Every detour had purpose. Every step you took in faith was leading you exactly where heaven intended. When everything falls apart and the future seems uncertain, hope is not just a comfort, it's a lifeline. The Bible doesn't ask us to ignore suffering, but to interpret it through eternity. Ecclesiastes 3 gently reminds us that every pain has a purpose, every season has a shelf life. There is a time for everything, which means no trial lasts forever. God is not only working in your present, He's preparing your future. And when your eyes can't see the breakthrough, your spirit can still lean into the promise that one day all things will be made new. Paul, writing to a church under intense persecution, said something profound. Our light and momentary afflictions are producing an eternal weight of glory. 2 Corinthians 4:17. He wasn't minimizing pain, he was magnifying perspective. What we suffer today is building something eternal tomorrow. Every moment of heartbreak, every unanswered prayer, every lonely night, they are not lost. They are deposits into the account of eternal reward. Earth may not always validate your pain, but heaven always sees, always records, and always redeems. That's why Revelation 21:4 is not a fantasy, it's a divine guarantee. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. That's not poetic comfort, it's prophetic reality. One day the pain that nearly broke you will bow before the glory that restored you. One day there will be no more grief, no more delay, no more silent nights. You won't carry the weight of loss forever, because God Himself will carry you into the fullness of joy. And when that day comes, every waiting season will make perfect sense. What felt like delay will be seen as divine preparation. Until that day arrives, we walk by faith, not blindly but anchored in promise. Hope doesn't mean pretending everything is okay. It means believing that one day everything will be. You may stumble through some days, but eternity has already secured your destination. The grave is not your finish line. Heaven is. And the hope that God plants in you today is the strength that will sustain you until then. So don't let today's sorrow define your story. Let eternity reshape how you endure the now. The suffering has an end, but the glory won't. So hold on, keep your eyes on the promise. Heaven isn't far. It's closer with every act of surrender, every whispered prayer, every tear you entrust to God. The time you thought was wasted, it's going to shine like gold in eternity. The pain you couldn't understand, it's going to be answered in full. And when you finally step into the place prepared for you, not 1 second will have been in vain. Until then, walk with hope. Endure with peace, because the best part of your story hasn't even begun, and eternity will be more beautiful than anything you ever imagined. Topic 6. The cycle of life. According to Ecclesiastes 3:1-8 reading, Ecclesiastes 3:1-8 is like watching the clockwork of eternity unfold, not in seconds, but in seasons. Each phrase, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, pulses with divine rhythm. God is not showing us a list of events, but a map of how life is meant to move through shifts, opposites, transitions, and returns. There's a sacred symmetry in it all, a reminder that even the most painful seasons are balanced by ones of restoration. Life under heaven is never static, never random, and never without purpose. One of the most comforting truths in this passage is that change is expected and accounted for. You won't stay in mourning forever. Joy will come. You won't be in a constant state of building. There will also be moments of rest. Ecclesiastes teaches us that no single moment defines your existence. There is a time for loss and a time for gain, a time for silence and a time to speak. The danger is trying to force yourself to remain in one season when God is gently trying to lead you to the next. Change is not always the enemy. Sometimes it's the way to healing. Faith in this light is not about resisting time, but walking with it. Too many of us pray for God to change our season when He's asking us to let the season change us. The weeping, the waiting, the letting go, they're not punishments, they're processes. And if we keep trying to rush to the next chapter, we'll miss the wisdom God wrote in this one. Ecclesiastes 3 is not a call to control your life's timing, but to surrender to the one who already has. When you align with his rhythm, even suffering takes on meaning. Even silence speaks of love. There's a divine poetry in how life flows through contrast. Light makes sense only because we've known darkness. Peace becomes precious because we've walked through war. Love is deeper when born from grief. Ecclesiastes 3 doesn't just explain the seasons. It teaches us to see God in all of them. Not just in the bloom, but in the pruning. Not just in the building, but in the breaking. The cycle of life isn't linear, it's layered. And each layer brings you closer to the heart of the Father, not in spite of your story, but through every part of it. So don't fight the cycle. Embrace it. You are not stuck. You are being carried. God is not behind, He's ahead, waiting for you at the next turn. What you see as delay might be divine timing calibrating your heart to His. And when the rhythm of your life begins to echo the rhythm of heaven, peace flows. Not because everything's easy, but because everything is in His hands. In this divine cycle, even the hardest times are holy. Because when God writes your seasons, none of them are wasted. And all of them are sacred. You may have arrived at this message tired, confused, or secretly wondering if you somehow missed your moment. But hear this. Just because your timing didn't align with your expectations doesn't mean God has abandoned His plan. When Solomon said, "There is a time for everything," he was revealing a truth that stretches beyond logic, a divine reassurance that even your detours are included in the design. What looks like delay is often divine development. You're not outside of God's plan. You're simply in a chapter that's still being written, and heaven never rushes what it intends to last. It's easy to believe in God when doors open and prayers are answered. The challenge is trusting Him when nothing makes sense. But your silence doesn't mean God stopped speaking. It means He's still working, beneath the surface, beyond your senses. He's healing what you didn't know was broken, aligning pieces you didn't know were missing, and preparing blessings you wouldn't be ready to carry if they came too soon. The time you thought was lost is being redeemed. The seed you buried in tears is beginning to take root. Just because you haven't seen the fruit doesn't mean it isn't growing. So don't let anxiety become your compass. Don't let your fear of being behind push you to act outside of God's season. Waiting isn't weakness, it's worship. It's saying, "God, I trust your pace more than my pressure." Some of the greatest answers are hidden in delayed seasons. Some of the deepest roots are formed in the dark, and one day what seemed like stagnation will be seen as sacred preparation. You are not failing, you are being formed. And when your appointed time comes, nothing on earth or in hell will be able to stop what God has ordained. Before you go, make a decision in your spirit. I won't give up in the waiting. I won't curse the silence. I will walk by faith, even when I don't understand the timeline. Because if God is in control of my story, then even the chapters I don't like are leading me somewhere holy. So if this message stirred something in your heart, subscribe to the channel, activate the notifications, and share it with someone who needs this reminder too. Here, we don't just talk about faith, we live it one step at a time until the fullness of God's timing is fulfilled in us.